Hello and welcome back to Causal 101. I'm Taimur, the founder and CEO of Causal, and in this series, I'll be walking you through how to use our product. Now, even if you're like me and you usually like figuring things out for yourself, this video series is the quickest way for you to pick things up with Causal, and I can guarantee you that. We'll be starting from zero and bringing you up to speed on all the different parts of Causal. And for the purposes of this series, we're going to be working up to building a financial model for a coffee business. We'll have a great dashboard with some charts and tables comparing different scenarios. We'll connect to some historical data in Google Sheets, and we'll have some custom forecasts based on different assumptions and formulas that we build into our model. In the first video, we looked at Causal's main interface for building models, the spreadsheet. We entered some basic assumptions and wrote some simple formulas to do some calculations. In this video, we're going to be adding more detail to our financial model, so we'll be working with more advanced formulas and calculations, as well as creating different scenarios and understanding the basics of Causal's categories concept. Let's dive in. All right, so we've got our basic model from last time. We have three simple assumptions, and we're doing a couple of calculations to work out our sales in each month and our revenue in each month. Now, there's obviously more to our business than just collecting revenue. Each time we sell a product, it actually costs us some money to produce and deliver that product. This is typically called the cost of goods sold. Let's include that in our model. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new section underneath this section called cost of goods sold. So if you hover over the section and click on the plus button, we can give this a name of cost of goods. And while we're at it, we'll rename our calculation section to be called revenue. Now, the main components of our cost of goods are firstly the materials costs, so the cost of the raw materials, and the production costs. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple more assumptions in the input section for material costs, and maybe this will be, say, $10, and we'll create a variable for production costs, and maybe this is $15. I'll give this a dollar symbol. And so now, based on the material and production costs for each sale, we can work out how much that is actually costing us over time. And so our material costs down here in our cost of goods will just be our sales multiplied by our material costs. And we need to make sure to select material costs from the input section, not from this cost of goods section in this case. And our production costs will be our sales multiplied by our production costs from the input section. And finally, we want to work out the total cost of goods, and so we can create a variable for total cost of goods. And here we can use our first function in Causal. Now, Causal supports a lot of different functions, basically the same syntax as you'll be used to in Excel for most of them. And so in this case, we want to use the sum function. So we'll type in sum, and we'll open bracket, and we can actually take a sum of a whole section in one go. So if we type in cost of goods, we can select the cost of goods section here. And so what we're doing is we're taking the sum across the whole of this section. And if we hit enter, Causal should have done that calculation, and we can change this to be formatted as a currency. To change how any variable is formatted, you can do what I just did and just click on the variable symbol here to the left of the name. Causal will try and guess the formatting based on what you've written in your formula as well, so you won't have to do this manually for each variable. So we've got a few assumptions, we've got our revenue, we've got our cost of goods. Let's now create a section for some different metrics that we care about in our business. The first metric we're going to care about is our gross profit. This will give us an idea of how profitable our business model is. And our gross profit will just be our revenue, and we'll subtract our total cost of goods from that. So we have our gross profit. We might also be interested in working out some averages. We might be interested in our average revenue over, say, the last 3 months. Here's how we can do that in Causal. We can create a variable for our average revenue last 3 months. And here we can use the average function. So if we type in AVG, open bracket, this is our average function in Causal. Now what we want to take an average of is our revenue. So we'll type in our revenue here. So we'll select our revenue variable from the revenue section. And you'll see by default, Causal is going to try and pull in revenue in this month. So a single month's revenue, which is changing for each month of our model. Now in this case, we want to take an average of the last 3 months. And so what we can do is click here on where it says this month, and we'll see that there's a bunch of different options here. We could take the previous month, we can take a year ago, we can take spans of time, so the last 3 months, the last 12 months, and so on. And so we're going to select the last 3 months here for this option. And so now Causal is going to take an average over the last 3 months. If we hit enter, we should see something interesting. Right, so it looks like we are now seeing this average over the last 3 months as a rolling average throughout the course of our model. If we just dive into what Causal is actually doing under the hood, if we click on this last 3 months and click on custom, we can see Causal's syntax under the hood for doing these kinds of time spans. So when working with time in formulas in Causal, we have what we call a helper variable, and that helper variable is called t. And so in these expressions, what we can do is write things relevant to t, t being the current point in time. And so t minus 1 would refer to 1 month ago. T minus 2 would refer to 2 months ago. And finally, t minus 3 obviously refers to 3 months ago. To work with ranges of time, we use the colon syntax here. And so what we've done here is write t minus 3 colon t minus 1, which is telling Causal to look at the set of values 3 months ago all the way up to 1 month ago. And so that's a 3-month span of time that Causal is looking at, and we're taking an average over that span of time. Now, using this syntax, pretty much anything is possible. You can even refer to other variables, but for now we'll be happy with just taking this last 3 months average. So now we've got our inputs, we've got some revenue coming in, we've got our cost of goods, and we've got a couple of metrics. Let's take this model to the next level by adding in our different products. Now, if we were using Excel or Google Sheets, what we'd have to do probably is select all of these different things that we've just created, probably copy them, paste them a few times. We'll have 3 or 4 copies of each thing if we had 3 or 4 different products. And then we have to create some extra calculations to add up all of the different products into totals and subtotals and things like this. Now, our philosophy when it comes to Causal is that we don't want you to have to do any duplicate work. When there's lots of duplication, models become harder to follow. It leads to errors being made. It makes it time consuming for you to update your model. And so what we're going to be doing is instead creating what we call a category in Causal. Now, a category is essentially a list of different things that you want to break your model or parts of your model down by. So we'll go up here into the top left and click on this plus button in the category section, and we're going to create a new category here, and we're going to call this product, since this is going to be a list of all of our products. And if we now hit enter, we should see that Causal has created this product category and opened this nice little pop-up window down at the bottom where we can modify this category. And so we'll change these default products to be the products of our actual business. So maybe our business sells coffee beans, maybe it sells ground coffee, maybe we also sell AeroPress, coffee machine, and maybe as a final product we sell the gooseneck kettle, very fancy kettle. So we have 4 products that our business sells within this product category that we have created. Let's close this for now. What we can do now is break down some of the different assumptions of our model by our product category. So let's think about which assumptions are going to depend on each product. Well, I guess the most obvious one is actually the revenue per sale. And so what we're going to do is go to the revenue per sale variable, click on this categories button, and we'll see that our product category is ready and waiting for us, and we're going to click on the product category. Now, what this will do is break down the variable by those different products and let us set a different formula or a different value for each product. So maybe our coffee beans we sell for $20, our ground coffee we sell for $15, our AeroPress we sell for $40, and our gooseneck kettle we sell for $100. So now what we've done is we've defined a different amount of revenue for each of our products, and we can just delete this 50 at the top level since it doesn't really make sense anymore. Now what we'll see is that Causal has tried to summarize the total revenue per sale by adding up all these different values. It's added up these different values to get $175. In this case, we don't want to aggregate all of those up, and so we can right click on the variable, go to the category aggregation, and tell Causal, hey, don't bother trying to aggregate this variable, it doesn't really make sense. So now Causal won't show us that total. Now the material costs are also going to depend on each product. So in exactly the same way, we can go to the material cost variable, we can click the categories button, select the product category, and now set a different value for our material costs for each product. So maybe the coffee beans cost $10, the ground coffee costs $5, maybe there's less of it. The AeroPress costs $30, and the gooseneck kettle costs $90. And finally, we'll do the same for the production costs. In this case, we don't actually produce the AeroPress and gooseneck kettle ourselves. We just buy them from the brands for those prices, but we do produce the coffee beans and the ground coffee. Maybe the coffee beans only has $3 of production costs. The ground coffee has a little bit more since we're grinding the beans. So maybe this has $5. And now we have a nice breakdown for our material and production costs. And as before, we'll just disable those aggregations so that we're not seeing these confusing sums in our spreadsheet. Now the final thing we just need to do is set the initial monthly sales for each product. And so we can do this in exactly the same way. Maybe we have 100 coffee beans, 150 ground coffee, 20 AeroPresses, and 5 gooseneck kettles being sold per month to start off in our model. So if we wanted, we could do the same for our growth rate, but we're going to keep it simple for now. So what we've done is we've gone through a bunch of our inputs, a bunch of our assumptions, and we've applied this product breakdown to set different values for each product. Let's see what this has done to the rest of our calculations. If we go into our revenue section, we'll see that we now have this expand and collapse arrow next to each of our variables. If we expand this out, we'll see that our sales is now broken down by each product as well, and Causal is totaling that up to get the total sales. And the same goes for our revenue. The revenue is broken down by each product, and we can see the total revenue as well. Now, the nice thing is that we didn't have to change any of our formulas. Our formulas are exactly the same as before, but because our formulas are referring to other variables that have this product breakdown, Causal knows that it needs to do the calculation separately for each product and then aggregate those into a total. And this really is the beauty of categories. You can define breakdowns in a single place, and all of your downstream calculations will use those category breakdowns automatically. You don't have to worry about things like lookups and duplication. We really still just have a handful of formulas in this model, but all of these calculations are being done separately for each of the 4 different products and being totaled up into aggregations. Now, to round off our model, let's include the final set of expenses that our business incurs, and these are what we're going to call operational expenses. And so below our cost of goods, we'll create a section called operational expenses. We'll keep this section very simple. We'll maybe just have simple assumptions for our rent and our payroll costs, and those are going to be the core operational expenses. So for rent, maybe our rent costs us $5,000 per month, and our payroll costs us $3,000 per month. So we've got our rent and our payroll costs, and maybe we expect these to change in 2024. We expect our rent to go up to $6,000, so we can click into that cell for January, and we'll click on this fill right button to fill it across the rest of the months. And maybe we'll do a similar thing for payroll costs. We expect that to go up to $3,500, and we'll click on the fill right arrow once again. So we have rent and payroll costs. And so for our operating expense section, we'll just create a variable for total operating expenses, and this will just be rent plus payroll costs. So we can see that over time. We now have a bunch of different things in our inputs, and so we might want to group some of these things together just to make it easier to follow. And so we can select multiple things by doing command and click. And so we can maybe do command click on these two. And if we now right click and click on group 2 variables, we can group them. We can call this cost of goods. We'll do the same for rent and payroll costs. We can actually do Command G on a Mac or Control G on a Windows computer to do that automatically. This will be our operating expenses, and we'll group these together into a group called revenue assumptions. So we have groups within some of these sections now, and we have our total operating expenses. Now the final metric that we care about in our business is our net profit, and this will just be our gross profit minus our total operating expenses. Let's see what happens here. Now here is where we're seeing something pretty interesting. We know that our gross profit is $1,700 in total in January. We know that our operating expenses are $8,000. And so if we do 1,700 minus 8,000, we should end up with a negative 6,300. However, what we're ending up with instead is negative 30,300. What's going on here? Now here is where we have to be a little bit careful when working with categories. The reason for this difference is that our gross profit is broken down by the different products, coffee beans, ground coffee, etc. But our total operating expenses is not broken down by any product. It doesn't really relate to products. In our formula for net profit, what we're taking is gross profit, which is broken down by product, as it says right here, and we're subtracting total operating expenses, which has no product breakdown. And so what Causal will do by default is take each gross profit product individually, and from each of these products, it'll subtract the total operating expenses. So it'll do 700 minus 8,000 for this. It'll do 750 minus 8,000 for this, and so on. And we can see what those numbers look like. So Causal is doing that calculation at the product level, and that's why we're getting numbers that look a little bit out of whack. And so what we want to tell Causal is, hey, let's not worry about the product breakdown for gross profit. We just want to take the total gross profit. We want to subtract the total operating expenses. We're not dealing with product breakdowns for this calculation. And so the way to tell Causal this is to click into the category button for gross profit and just click on this aggregate button to aggregate across all of these different products. If we now hit enter, we should see that the product breakdown goes away. Our calculation looks about right. 1,700 minus 8,000 does indeed equal negative 6,300, and all is well. And that's going to go forward into the future for us too. And it looks like in Jan 2025, we actually start to break even as a business, which is great news for us. So just to reiterate, it's very important to understand which categories are being used in which variables in your model, and to make sure that you're not mixing different kinds of categories in your formulas unless you really know what you're doing, or unless that's really what you want to do. And so there will come a point where you need to aggregate away some categories in order to do certain kinds of calculations. For example, our net profit and our total operating expenses. It doesn't really make sense to break these down by the products, and so we need to aggregate these categories away if we're working with other variables that are broken down by those categories. Now we'll have detailed videos on all of these concepts. We'll have detailed videos on formula specifically, categories specifically, where we'll go into much more detail about these things. So don't worry if you still have questions, just go over to one of those detailed videos. We're gonna stop here for today on our Causal 101 series. In the next video, we'll be learning how to create some visualizations based on this financial model. So creating charts and tables and dashboards, which we can then share out to people. I'll see you there.